Vegana presents. Snow White. Programmed by John Ferguson Aditi. Long ago, there was a very kind queen. She gave birth to a lovely baby girl, whose skin was as white as snow. Everyone called her Snow White. Sadly, after Snow White was born, the queen died. And after a time, the king married again. The new queen was very beautiful but very wicked. Every day, the new queen asked her magic mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You are my queen." Time passed. Snow White was growing up, with skin as white as the purest snow, eyes as shiny as the brightest stars, and a kind-hearted nature. One day, when the queen asked the mirror, "Who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror answered, "Snow White is 1,000 times more beautiful than you." The queen was shocked and angry. She called a huntsman and ordered him to kill Snow White. The huntsman took Snow White away into the forest. He drew his knife and was about to kill her. Then he changed his mind. Snow White was so beautiful and kind that he couldn't bring himself to kill her. Instead, he decided to let her go. Snow White wandered around in the forest for a long time. Eventually, she came to a little cottage amongst the trees. Snow White went inside. The whole cottage was in a mess. 7 unmade little beds were standing side by side against the wall. Snow White found a broom and started to sweep the floor. Soon, the room was clean. Then she lay down on one of the little beds and fell asleep. In the evening, the owners of the cottage came back. There were 7 dwarfs, who were shocked to see a beautiful girl sleeping in one of the beds. Snow White told the 7 dwarfs. What had happened to Hair? They were nice, kind dwarfs, and felt sorry for her. So they invited her to stay with them. Snow White said yes, and the dwarfs jumped for joy. Shortly afterwards, the wicked queen found out Snow White was still alive. She was very angry and decided to kill her with a poisonous apple. So, the queen disguised herself as an old woman and went to the dwarf's cottage in the forest. She took out a red apple and offered it to Snow White. It looked so delicious that Snow White accepted it at once. "Why don't you take a bite?" said the old woman. Without second thought, Snow White took a great big bite out of the rosy, red apple. In no time, Snow White fell down dead. Soon, the dwarfs came back home. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground, they were frightened. The dwarfs were so sad that they cried for 3 days. They didn't want to bury Snow White in the dark ground. They made a crystal coffin for her, laid her in it, and placed it in a quiet place in the forest. They stayed and guarded it day and night. One day, a prince came by. When he saw beautiful Snow White, he fell in love with her, and asked the dwarfs to carry the crystal coffin back to his palace. On the way, the dwarfs tripped and dropped the coffin onto the ground. The sudden jolt caused the poisonous apple to fall from Snow White's mouth. Snow White opened her eyes. She wasn't dead, after all. Change of subject of formulae.